it is the opening of the Commonwealth Heads of Government 2018, about a few minutes from CPTM Smart Partners Hub at the Buckingham Palace, where all the leaders of the Commonwealth have been welcoming Her Majesty, and who just delivered her speech to open the this year's special Heads of Government meeting. Now, why is special? It is special because the Commonwealth reached a point where it's quite obvious that it will not only adapt, it will jump into a different phase. Now, if it doesn't jump, or if it is not recognized that it already has a different dynamics emerging, taking forward from the last so many years, then the greatest value of the Commonwealth in the global community is not yet visible. And one of the things that CPTM and the Smart Partnership Movement, through its members and Smart Partners, does, through the dialogues, 21 dialogues, and so many of hundreds and hundreds of country tasks built into the initiatives, particularly in the last 7 years or so, financial inclusion initiatives, quality and standards initiative, and all the rest of them. One of the things, the contribution that Commonwealth Partnership for Technology Management, the smart partners involved in this fabric, do is to make visible, to spot signals for the future today. And it has its ability since so many years. And each time there is a biennial meeting, and a lot of reviews are taking place within all the parts of the Commonwealth and organizations, Commonwealth Secretary and everybody else. The CPTM, as is known since '95, but CPTM before, as was known as Science Management Organization in Commonwealth Science Council, CommonSat, Commonwealth Management for Science Technology, Commonwealth Consultative Group for Technology Management. Since 1984, each time the biennial meeting comes, Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, around the Commonwealth. Today it is in London. CPTM contributes to this visibility of the power of convening, as Her Majesty and Prime Minister, the host, Prime Minister of UK, the host, mentioned. We have been celebrating and contributing to this week, Commonwealth Week, from Friday, last Friday, from Friday to Friday. And in many ways, first of all, even the weather seemed to have adapted since we started from Friday. So today is probably one of the best days of the whole week for the opening of the Heads of Government. But just to say that it's taking place, this Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in April, when UK, London, is at its best with daffodils and soon strawberries are already coming, British strawberries rather than from wherever else. And within the CPTM Smart Partners Hub, you could see a bit of that, flowers, and not only that, as usually, we have an open house, open door, a free-flowing in and out ideas and everything else. But also when Kirik last week, Thursday, came in to inspect to see are we in the right mode or mood, he said, "What do you have on that table?" "Well, I mean the usual," I said. "And what is the usual?" "Well, I mean a bit of biltong we'll put from Southern Africa." He said, "Oh, I'll send you by special delivery some Kenyan macadamia
Macadamia and cashews.
And cashew nuts.
Honey-coated.
Honey-coated, so to be even special, celebrated.
From the beehives of the farmers.
In Kenya. Which part of Kenya?
It's in the northern side of Kenya, going towards Mount Kenya.
So what do you do with them? It's called out of
You
Africa.
consume them
Well,
in
they are-
its fullest glory.
No. When you come back, you need to tell us if it's trade, the future of trade, going towards contribution.
Whichever
to
way you want to look at
Okay.
it. But
So we obviously both in the Smart Partners Hub library, but also in the garden room, the networking room. Since Friday, we have us, Keith and I and Tom, we were trying to reflect so many years ago when in Namibia, at Swakopmund, President Roma at that time, the host of our Smart Partnership Dialogue, we were trying to express the value and the diversity of the Smart Partnership movement as it was emerging, but that was very much because of the Commonwealth diversity, and in the manifesto which emerged of the Smart Partnership movement, which is very positive. It's not idealistic, one would say, because since 1997 we could pin down so many things that happened and will happen in addition to the human capability and networks and fabric that we achieved. So the manifesto was not limits to, was limitless, but as Omar will, our chairman, will explain, the limits and limitless will be continuously seized and debated, because there are so Keith probably may come in to quote something from the manifesto in relation to the products and the diversity of the Smart Partnership, which is visible all over the Smart Partners Hub. At the library, there are also there is a sample of books and things and poems that CPTM Smart Partners over the years have produced. They're only a sample, we don't have them all. There are also a collection of some of the best programs, and very much the leading avant-garde type of programs, like the Institutional Development for Environmental Action, which for about 4 years in 10 countries all over the Commonwealth, they dealt with serious environmental problems for their resolution. And I'll come back to that. That was one thing that the CPTM, at that time known as CCGTM, was first in the Commonwealth to deal with that. Before that, again, the network experimented on behalf of all the Commonwealth in the Caribbean with the research and development evaluation, but in real time, and with what is called artificial intelligence application expert system from 1984 to 1989. So spotting signals at any time of the future today, as it was then and as is today for tomorrow, it is a business in which CPTM seem to be, and I'm very, very pleased that we were able to mobilize a number of CPTM Smart Partners in the Commonwealth during our daily open house, which will continue tomorrow, open house sessions, and above all, to have with us a constant Smart Partners group led by the chairman, CPTM fellows like Sir Martin Lang, CPTM companions and directors, and of course our Smart Partners Hub team, founders, most of them. just to end up my introduction, the one thing that George, who is almost, are you the same age as Her Majesty?
Similar, yes.
So
Yeah,
I don't know, when did we,
Well, 27.
27 you
born in
came into
27.
in
She
India?
was born in 26.
26, so you're just 1 year difference. But George, you have been together with Clive Palmer
Mhm.
around Professor Raman
Yeah.
in New Delhi at the Center for the Council for Scientific Industry
Indicators.
Research. We started to look at indicators, quality for science technology indicators,
Right.
and it wasn't theoretical, it was quite,
No,
yeah.
I
So
wrote
since
a
then,
paper about Cyprus
exactly,
indicators
please,
in the
come in?
reforesting. Yeah.
please.
Yes, I made the study of Ministry of Agriculture, its objectives and its plans, and designing indicators of performance to evaluate progress from year to year. And I remember I read it here and somebody assessed it. Right.
But the thing about that was that that was 1980, in between 1984-89, yeah?
Right, yes.
And so the Caribbean group already started to work on this
Standards and,
R&D evaluation.
Yeah.
But the idea of the quality, measuring quality, if there is measuring the right word,
Yeah.
of science and technology, it became one of the again
Right.
leading new ways of dealing with, not only for Cyprus, not only for the Commonwealth, but the idea was embedded into an innovatory, if I were to call it, method called NUSAB, Numeral Spread Assessment Pedigree, which was picked up by WHO and the to measure the quality of the particular things. So
Followed all by standards to sort of certify quality. Yeah.
and then it was also translated into standards
Yeah.
for quality rather than numbers. Yeah. Okay. So what else did you do? Because there are so many things
You
in
want me to-
Cyprus. Because going
Well-
on the environment, again, statistics, the first people
Well, at
who...
that time
yeah.
I was the director of a technical college, or the first technical college state-owned in Cyprus. But when I retired from there, I was the chairman of the Cyprus Standards for 9 years. And in those 9 years, I persuaded the Minister of Trade and Commerce that standards shouldn't be a department, a governmental department.
That was again.
For many years, many manufacturers would go and speak into the ear of the minister and say, you say, give me a certificate that this product I'm making is according to the standard. So they agreed that we should make it as an independent organization under a special law with a board of management that was from trade unions, employers, and
Yeah, the
technical
smart partnership.
people and so on. So it was established as an independent.
When was that? Yeah.
In 1990.
Something around 1990s.
93, 94, yeah.
But that was because, again, there was
Yes, we had a
Caribbean.
yes. And we
Quality
had a
management.
visitor from
Yeah.
CPTM.
It was
yeah.
99.
So there was a Caribbean kind of group on quality management which followed the R&D research and development evaluation, which was again an avant-garde type of group to implement, to put in quality and management ISO
Yeah.
standard within real type situation for about 3 years with Shell International and 15 islands, and that went all around the Commonwealth. In Malta, it was set up the Bureau of Standards because Cyprus set up the Bureau of Standards, and here we are today
with
with
Seychelles
yeah,
for standards.
yeah. Today, the Quality and Standards Initiative being a group of the Commonwealth group within the International Standards Organization and promoting digital landscape and their new role, strategic role.
Well, in fact, something like 400 or more standards have been adopted by the Cyprus Bureau of Standards. The only two standards that we designed ourselves was one for Halo machines and the other for the solar heaters. Everything else, solar heaters are the thing. You go into Cyprus and every building has a solar heater. And it's been there for the last 50 or so many years. And for 9 months, you don't need to use electricity.
Okay, welcome, Anna.
I'm sorry.
No, you come here, Kirit. No, you Kirit. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was saying that small countries adopt ISO standards as national standards, but they design some special ones that are particularly referred to the particular country.
But if I may remind you, George, again, when you said, okay, solar heater standard,
Right.
and we asked you, we were with you, quite a number of us from Malta, from Caribbean, from Shell, can we see this standard that you developed for the solar heater?
Oh, yes.
So you show it besides the physical manifestation, and every house had it ahead of everybody else, wherever.
Well-
But if you remember, you also said, but I can copy this standard, and you can send it to everybody in the Commonwealth.
Somebody
Imagine
from Kenya
that. Exactly.
came and said, give me the standard, and we are going to design solar heaters in Kenya according to the Cyprus standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
it
mean, these
was
are physical
standards-
manifestations.
Standards are a means of exporting technology.
Yeah.
Because
Alan
when you adopt-
Bryden would have liked
When you
to hear
adopt a
that.
standard, you learn the technological process of manufacturing it. So technology exchanges or transfer goes
Give it to Anna.
through standards as well. Plus trade, of course.
Okay. What else? You also done something else, and then we'll finish. There was one thing I remember. No, because you were. I'm trying to point out.
Don't tell everything.
No. I just stopped it after that.
Right.
There was a point where, because this is happening in most of the countries where we were, one thing led to another.
Okay.
But those things that were starting were so much avant-garde, ahead of everybody else, that everybody were trying to see how is George doing on this, that, the other, and they were trying to, everybody was trying to, and we were facilitating that, to be there or to hear what is George saying. So there was this, if you remember Keith and Cathy, the annual research and development expenditure, the annual kind of, what is it called?
It would be the
R&D expenditure
framework budget.
budget,
Yeah.
every year,
Yeah.
produced here. And each and every other country wanted to see if they could do the same thing, because there was this idea of 2% and whatever to be put into an R&D budget. And Oma was very excited, Tanshi Oma, because he already had less than 2, but towards 2. So an annual R&D expenditure. But then we came with the idea, having done the innovation, the environment, why don't we have the science and technology expenditure type built into the annual statutory statistics, but also why don't we also bring the environment, the cost to do with environment? So you were the first ones who experimented with that.
But a special sort of establishment was setting up the Institute of Technology, as we called it, and the purpose of it was to certify consultants who would promote technological innovation and progress in various manufacturing sectors. And because they were certified, whatever they would recommend, we were prepared to pay the fees of the consultant, provided the the employer would adopt the particular recommendation. So they made a report that we could introduce a new technology in this particular manufacturing process according to this. So we, the institute would pay 1,500 or whatever was the fee of the consultant, only assuming or provided the manufacturer would adopt a particular recommendation. And of course they paid the consultant and we paid back. And I remember when we sent the check to the employer, he rang me up and said, "Are you a government department? The first time that I deal with such organization and I'm paid on the same day." Usually you wait for 6 months for the check to come. So they will introduce new concepts, the new practices.
This is, and there are a number of other dimensions,
Right,
like
yeah.
the famous farmhouse in the mountains and the vision and so on, which will come back a bit later when we talk about the vision. But the Commonwealth Secretary General just announced the Commonwealth Innovation Hub, but what today is referred to as innovation is very broad. But in the context of CPTM from 1984, what innovation was, OMA, literally for within the Malaysian context, and then promoting it in each and every country where we went, made a very clear distinction between what Harvard Business Review, whoever consultants define as innovation generic, and what is actually innovation in the context of science, technology, and the rest of it. So, Keith,
Let me first of all say it's wonderful to be back here after quite a period out, reasons for which I won't go into, some of them personal. But as I walked through the door, what struck me was it's the same but different. And the constancy of purpose of CPTM is what immediately hit me, because, if you'll let me indulge me a moment, I came here prior to Langkawi 92.
Yeah.
And I came here as the Overseas Business Development Director from an automotive company, and my boss said, "This woman's been on to us and thinks we should go and talk to her.
Yeah.
Go and talk to her." So I
that.
came down here, and within 10 minutes of discussion with this woman,
Had a job to do.
she said to me, "Would you like to speak to our chairman?" And he was on the phone, and she said, "Tell him what you told me." And I thought, this is going rather fast. And we talked about Copy Plus.
Exactly.
What we talked about was, let's share things, but let's just share them and say we'll do the same things. Let each of us look at them in our own way, in our own environment, in our own requirements, and make them better, improve them. So that was the start. It's notable that one of my passwords, and I know you should have many, many passwords, is Langkawi 92.
Yeah.
The constancy of purpose and what happened thereafter was I then went to work for the Department of Trade and Industry as an advisor to government on the subject of manufacturing and globalization. And I took with me the responsibility and the linkages I had with CPTM. So I moved out of mainstream manufacturing, overseas business development, and moved to DTI, where they said, "What's this CPTM you keep talking about?" So I explained it to them. I said, "Oh, okay, well, you better keep in touch with them then." Right. So I did this, and I eventually became an alternate director representing the DTI. The third part of my career, before I retired for the first time, was to join a consultancy that was advising the British, it started with the automotive industry, how to improve its productivity. And the sharing of this through the supply chain, it was quite novel in as much that everything we developed we put out there and said, if you want to use it, you can. Yes, we had a normal commercial side, but the main thing was to, again, use the Copy Plus idea and use the ideas of smart partnerships really within supply chains and why that could work.
Yeah.
We started off in the automotive industry, and they said, right, you've done this CPTM thing as a member of manufacturing, a member of industry, you've done it as part of DTI. Now we'd like to have you talking about CPTM and smart partnerships and why they're actually relevant to people throughout supply chains in all sectors. So we moved from automotive to aerospace to foods, red meat, as I was told to call it, pig meat, not pork.
Yes.
We went to work in all of these other areas, in dairy, we worked in construction, and the whole idea was to pass on what we had learned from other sectors. And all through this time, I was being drawn back regularly to CPTM because it was in our interests as well to see the signals, to learn from other people, to listen. And much of what, I know we talk a lot here at CPTM, but we listen even more, I hope, because you meet people who will say something, you think, oh, that triggers an idea, that's something I'd heard about. Then the next thing Michaela says, did you know I've got so-and-so coming next week, you really ought to meet him. So that's my involvement, and I'm pleased to be re-engaging again, but I will again say one thing. You referred to the manifesto.
Yeah.
We were sitting here one afternoon.
After Namibia.
Yeah, and I think we'd got half an hour spare. So Michaela said, we need to write a manifesto. Tom was here.
Yeah.
She said, Tom, you can do that. Keith, you can do something. She said, there's no rush. We need to get it out in a couple of days, at least the first draft. The reason it is relevant is that my contribution, one of my contributions, was to talk about the Commonwealth and its foods and its menus and the flavours of the Caribbean, the flavours of the subcontinent and the mixing and the mélange of all this. And that really is what I think of when I come to CPTM. It is what's on the table, it is the people I meet, it is what they say, it is the reading lists I've continued to get every week, and I do read some of them, but it is the fact that this constancy of purpose, the way of thinking, the insistence that people are important, as we see all these changes, people are important, and the trust that we have built up within CPTM, the fact I could talk to someone at the end of a phone and say, do you remember when we were down at CPTM, we mentioned, can I have a chat about that? As I've watched what's been going on in terms of a potential, I think, rejuvenation of the Commonwealth, it just struck me that what I was seeing was something that fitted, or to use a good old DTI term, it chimed so well that it made a lot of sense. And that's why I was delighted when we spoke, and I was pretty much sure that what was going to happen was that Michaela was going to say, by the way, you need to come down here next week. So that's my story, that's why I'm here, and it strikes me, as I've read and as I've kept up with briefing papers, I think there is no better time nor a time of greater relevance with what's happening in the Commonwealth and what CPTM can bring to the table. That's all.
It chimes extremely well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Shall we go to Anna? Anna, welcome. You're a CPTM companion. You can talk both about Dr. Iftikhar, your special companion, but also our companion since so many years, and Omar's companion as the most trusted science advisor, Ada, and all the rest of it. Anna.
Well, I'm sorry I'm late, but I don't have traffic.
I don't know what means
Absolutely
late. We
horrendous.
don't have an agenda. We just come.
Yes, I think my husband, Dr. Iftikhar, started right at the beginning. I don't know, what was the street that we were in, the original?
We were in Queen Anne's Gate. No,
Queen Anne's.
we were in Queen Anne's Gate.
Yes.
Yeah, we were in
And,
Queen Anne's Gate.
it was a wonderful concept, and my husband was really pleased and very grateful to belong to CPTM, and he enjoyed it many, many years.
It was a very well-known.
And then I
nuclear
used to
scientist.
come along, because very kindly Mahela invited me. But I was on social issues, which I'm a little bit sorry, but I think is almost being forgotten. And in this world as it is now, with a lot of problems, I think it's getting more and more important within the Commonwealth or within the world. And I don't know if it could be slightly included, because nowadays we've got tremendous, I mean, even in Uganda we've got a huge amount of refugees coming from the Congo, Bangladesh, we've got the Rohingyas, and I don't know how the world, I belong to United Nations, and I don't know how we're going to feed all these people. Eventually we're going to say we can't do it, and a lot of people are going to starve. I don't see how we can. I know America's doing a lot, and we also are doing a lot, but it's a big problem.
I think, Anna, the social issues within the smart partnership fabric was powerful, and again, one of the first signals that this is what should happen, as distinct from having women, ladies, girls separately in a one, because which is what is happening again
I remember
now.
in Malaysia we went, my husband and I, and Grace Mugabe was in a ladies only, which was very interesting because of course we hear a lot about her now.
But then
and
she
she
became
was
part
wonderful, yes, and we also have seen various places of interest which is helping, you know, the countries are helping. So no, I have learned so much, and what I love is that everybody is together, and at the dialogues, which we haven't had for a little while, everybody is equal. So it's a great place to meet and talk to just the ordinary people of the country. And I'm so grateful about that.
Thank you very much, Anna,
I
for
hope we can
constant
continue for many years.
reminder for so many years within the Smart Partnership as a movement, and at the Hub particularly, is very important when, you know, things, people come through the door and we hear about it, and you come in and remind everybody about this.
But I think the 29ers is excellent, because we do need the young people will be taking over.
They will be on
And
the
it's so
phone
important, yes.
again, and they were since Friday. Thank you very much, Anna, and I suppose we should go to Khatib as continuing with social issues plus all sorts of other things. Kati, you are in so many, as a companion also, you are such a founder, and in all sorts of areas. And if we talk about the beginning of Malaysia involvement, serious involvement, besides CHOGM, who had the courage to come with me to Omar, who didn't quite know us, but he was asked, he will tell us the story, what happened at that time. But immediately after that, Ashok and I, we required somebody else, legitimate, more legitimate than we were, to say this is how we do it in the government. So everybody was afraid of you at that time, you do know that. In the whole, not in the movement. When we got in the movement, in UK, you don't know, she was in the ESRC, Economic Social Research Council. And I'll never forget when I met her first time, she didn't know I was there. There are all these greatest people, one of them just passed away from Sussex, from the science policy community in UK. And here is Kati coming, everybody waiting. And she told them, it's no good just science policy and all that. It has to be a commercial also, a way to measure the commercial application of all this. And everybody, I mean, it was a shock to the system. And she was in Mrs. Thatcher's, the Prime Minister's office. So then somehow, I don't remember why you agreed to meet me, but when we met, I couldn't understand that you were the same person that everybody was fearful of. And here we are. You are with us, England. So please come in. You give us robustness and always.
Like that.
Yeah. No, I mean you didn't know about that, but it's quite a perspective.
It's astonishing that
the way I think I present myself is opposite to the way you saw me. But
Yeah.
actually, Omar was with you when you came to see me.
I suppose so,
cabinet
yeah.
office.
And Ian Downing took us, yeah.
Yeah.
Ian Downing, yeah.
And the thing was, it was a sort of meeting of minds because we were engaged in
Commercial.
trying to get science and technology more commercial, but just not just commercial. I mean, more used, more applied, more of the ideas that could be useful to people being picked up, whether they were commercial or going to help in the National Health Service or whatever. And so there were, but it was actually being, when I went to the Cabinet Office, it was being driven by industry and the Advisory Council on Science and Technology. And I think that almost the whole of that membership.
Was it Lord Toombs that you were set up
He
a
wa-
group? Or
Yes, were all industrialists.
industrial?
They were all men as well.
They were men. Yeah, quite right. Quite right.
But it was really nice when Mihaila and Omar came and spoke the same language. And Malaysia was clearly going in the same direction, probably at greater speed than we were because
They had no choice. They had Dr. Mahathir.
a sort of clearer field.
We have less baggage.
That's quite that's true. So I was very pleased to start coming to the meetings that were going on.
Anna, that's yours.
What do you mean?
Sorry.
Who are we all afraid of now?
No, I'm sorry. I'm a disruptor.
That's a
as usual.
rhetorical question.
As a disruptor as usual.
Please, yeah.
But I was particularly interested in what Malaysia did because clearly they were able to do a lot of things a lot faster than us. And I was interested in the way they were really focused on the way to go, and that was clearly largely to do with your role and relationship with the Prime Minister. And you were very good at taking industry with you. And the whole idea of smart partnership started in Malaysia over a table in government department where you resided. And what was his name? The tie and shirt man?
Kishu.
Kishu, Tanshi Kishu.
Yes. And he introduced the idea because he was talking about how he produced these ties and these shirts. They were really beautiful products. He could supply Marks and Spencer's, and he did indeed. But Marks wanted a very quick delivery, which he could easily meet, except that everything got held up in customs. So he had to try and persuade customs to move quickly, and they didn't want to move any faster than they normally did. So it evolved out of that you needed a smart partnership so that you had government agencies and industry working together. And I think we emerged from that meeting with the term smart partnership, and that was in the 80s.
But Kati, you see, what is you are the symbol also, like Keith, but in a very specific area of this transfer of practice of how to go about to make a science policy, put a science policy in action, from within the government. And we were aiming, the group was aiming in Caribbean to go to set up a small unit always in the Prime Minister's office. And here is Malaysia coming in, and Dr. Mahathir set up not a unit, just appointed a science advisor. So Omar was both the unit and everything else. So then all the R&D evaluation experience that emerged from Caribbean was put in value around OMA. And then we met you because you were also preoccupied, but within British context. We met the chief scientist at that time also. And it wasn't very clear, actually, if you benefited more or similar from Omar's experience, where it looked like a lab in a more simple form, and Omar for sure benefited and replicated what was happening in Malaysia. So this is what is happening in most of the so many years that we are together.
What I think on that point was complicated and still is. The difference between developed countries and those which are developing, however fast or slow they're developing, is that the role of government is different. The role of government in developed countries is to retreat as far as possible and leave the market to work. And the role of the governments in the developing states, in my view, has to be more involved, more intrusive, if you like. That, a lot of the things which come out of Africa, for example, are tutted about, particularly by the Commonwealth and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and the British attitude towards how the Commonwealth should develop, because they don't understand the underlying relationship which exists between government and the private sector.
Exactly.
I mean, in African countries, for example, the private sector is not very large. A lot of what is going on there may be from companies which are large international companies, and then the rest is domestic, but it's on a fairly small scale. So, that's quite a difficult thing to handle, and it's difficult for governments not to be rolled over by the companies, the large international companies, who have their own interests, which are not necessarily really the interests of the country. And I do think it sort of aggravates some of the social problems that arise in those countries. So if you ask, whether we benefited more, or I don't think the relationship between us was like that. I think it was one of ideas.
Yes. It's a lab. It's a lab.
The extent to which you could use our ideas and we could use yours, but they weren't the same ideas and they weren't used in the same way.
But they brought in confidence on both sides, because if you observe something.
And Kathy, if I may add to what you said, developing countries, our Cyprus experience in 1960, we are still developing. Well, I'm not saying that we are developed now, but we made a lot of progress. And the President of Cyprus said, we have plans, and we expect the private sector to set up organizations, companies, to implement the plan and make use of it. But if the private sector is not ready to risk money, then the state would set up a private company controlled by government to fill in the gap. And gradually we would pass it on to the private sector. So there was an in-between stage encouraging the private sector to take responsibilities. But in the meantime, if you needed something to be done, state would set up its own organization to replace private sector. Supplement it.
You see, as soon as we get into a particular topic in depth, you can't stop it. I mean, this is happening since 1984. But let's move on, Kati. What is within the Commonwealth context lately? What do you think CPTM, as it evolved, could make a further contribution, not only to the Commonwealth, but to each and every country and to the global context, because we're known as being literally kind of par excellence networks and manage complexities and dealing with it and adaptive flexibility and all the stuff that we are.
In some ways, you know, you don't need to have the Commonwealth focus if you're focusing on what is happening in the sort of total system of science, technology, innovation, standards. I think that you've actually honed in on two very good matters. One is the whole of the financial system, the global financial system, and the position of the developing countries within that. And I think that the meetings that you have of national bank governors, I'd like them to be larger and involve more of the countries than have come.
This is the intention.
But I think they're very important, and I think you push ahead on that very well. And I think the standards, although I always shudder when I get to the subject of standards, but I do think standards and quality is another important area to go for. But one of the things I think that was different between the UK and Malaysia, and is still different between the developed and less developed countries, is that with an established country, science and technology, but more science, has its own established position in the whole, the environment, the hierarchy and everything. And industry is a different place, and you don't really have a conversation between the two. You may promote that or have all sorts of initiatives for it, but it's not happening naturally, unfortunately. And I think that's one of the things that we really do have to do. Now, if you're a country like Malaysia, at the position you were in the 80s, the 90s, you were actually starting your higher educational system. So, and you involved industry in that effort. So, in a sense, the conversation was established from the beginning to some extent.
This is a part of it.
Now, whether you've been able to maintain that conversation in a healthy state, I don't know. Maybe we've improved ours. Certainly we have richer scientists around the area, so maybe that's one of the results of the improvement. But
I think right from the beginning, actually, when I remember that Jose Furtado, the science advisor whom we owe this kind of courage, he didn't know how to deal with civil service, and he paid for it, but he had a lot of courage, being a scientist, to put together a group of well-known scientists with Sir John Kendrew, and to say, well, within the Commonwealth, there has to be science for technology for development, and not less and less talking about developing and developed. Try to bring science, to find a way to bring a kind of a level, same level playing field, if possible. And he said that can only happen through networks. And at that time, in '84, the idea of networks were in cybernetics, were an information theory and whatever, but not within the governments and not within the intergovernmental like the Commonwealth. But that being said, the Commonwealth Science Council itself came out of a network, and we won't go into that. But Patty, I wanted to sort of probably move on to Martin, because you talked about private sector, and I know he said that he came from private sector, and he did come from private sector, and then he moved on. Yeah.
You got contaminated then.
But I really don't know, even today, why Martin, how Martin has been captured, and he's with us. I mean, there are so many others. even today for so many years. Martin,
He was
Well, I'm-
our host.
No, it's purely selfish and self-interest.
self-interest. I mean,
As
we didn't
as
know
a
that.
businessman, because I mean, I think I recognise that the network that CPTM had in terms of the contacts you had created around the globe were of tremendous commercial benefit to my organisation of construction. So I mean, it was an opportunity to get on into the system and understand how these various countries worked.
But what we don't understand is how did you have time or temper to put up with all of us?
Well, no, it
Because
was
we
a-
behave differently from you. I mean, we talk differently.
How did you put up with that? That's the
Well, no, I mean,
That's
this
the
is
question.
kind
Well,
of,
I could be
but
a bit like a husband and wife situation. You can hear some things and ignore others. When I think
No.
of,
I mean, you're a very well known. Land construction
Yes,
is one
really,
of the
very,
most
yeah.
well known. How many hundreds or so many years?
170 odd years.
Yeah. So I mean,
But
the fact you came in, others came in.
yeah, sure.
So
But
that
I mean,
was the
with
whole
the, well, I
point.
mean, they recognised what advantages I was getting as a result of being a member of this organisation. So I don't know whether I, those early stages, did I contribute a great deal to it. And I think
I mean, the GC Mark
I was sucking out rather than necessarily putting more in.
Oh.
But I mean, I was lucky in that stage of our company's development. We were not in the, say, for example, the Far East at all. We'd never been
No,
in the Far East.
no. no.
And I believe that the company, in order to grow, inverted commas, we needed to do more work overseas. So therefore, to become more international. So therefore, in terms of having the time, I was allowed the time to actually participate in some of these various organisations. So that was why I got involved with you, then I got involved with WWF,
Yeah.
again, because that was another interest of mine, the environment and sustainability. And so having been involved with WWF for donkey's years, really, not quite as long as the Ashtonbury's, but
No, no.
yeah, but, having the same sort of intense belief in it.
Actually, Claude Monet
Yeah,
from Club of Rome.
Martin.
Martin, sorry, Monet was the painter.
Yeah.
Martin.
I'm not an artist by
no,
any
no,
stretch
no.
of the imagination.
The other day, he's part of this Club of Rome, who,
Right.
by the way, was founded by Alex King, one
Yeah.
of our kind of co-founders.
Right.
But he said hello to you
We'll say hello back.
the other day. I mean, this is the usual what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
I mean, I was struck, obviously, by what you were trying to do and to spread a message. Because technology, to me at that stage, was a hardware issue. You were selling a machinery or one to another.
Right.
But what you were not doing, you were selling sort of inverted commas software. I mean, it was the things that we had learned in UK, the way in which we handle sort of management issues and things like that. That's what you were trying to get over, to enable them to improve their economies, to enable them to produce better hardware again. So now, today, tackling the subject of finances and tax standards and whatnot, those are what I would call software issues. And it's still vitally important that we are able to give, I say, the benefit of our knowledge or share the benefit of our knowledge with people who haven't actually got it. And the challenges which CPTM has today, and for which it has failed, I think, is to pick up on what Keith was saying. We are not satisfactorily recognised by, certainly not HMG, that's for sure, and any other of the developed Commonwealth countries. I mean, the South Africas and the Canadas and Australias just don't appreciate what it is you do and what we've got.
I think we're talking about civil servants in foreign offices
Well,
who
I don't
are
think-
obviously not involved. Otherwise, there's so many in those countries involved. I mean,
Yeah,
so
but they're
many
not-
British.
They're
so
not
many
prepared
Canadians.
to actually give you
Yeah,
the
because they
necessary
don't.
support. So the mere fact that you
Yeah.
don't get the minuscule sums of money
A
you
minuscule,
require
yeah.
from
There's
somewhere
a
like
dysfunction in the governments.
Diffie could give you £1 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially towards
Yes.
the end of the financial
Yeah.
year. You know,
Yeah.
what the hell are we going to do with it? And that would revolutionise.
Yeah.
If somebody has not persuaded Diffie or Mrs. May or whoever it is that doing
But we
what you
did
do
persuade Department of Industry, and you were chairman of Board of Trade, and
Yeah,
you're
but
part of the
that's-
scheme.
But
If I might comment on that,
Yeah.
because I can see it from the outside. When you were asking Sir Martin why did he do it,
Yeah,
His competitors
Yeah.
watch what he does.
yeah, quite right.
Where is he? What's he up to?
He's in Botswana.
Those who are actually astute say there must be some value added for him to spend that amount of time on it. Those who are not so astute say, well, we're not interested in that. Secondly, when I worked for government, the biggest problem I had was persuading them that some of the things that they had, they pump primed us. The industry went to government.
And it's not getting people on. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
The industry went to government and said, we're actually quite tired of you telling us we're not productive and we don't do very well. Firstly, what would you know about it? Secondly, if you continue to do this, we're going to have a few more problems, because this was just after the time when we brought the Japanese investment into the auto industry. And so they made a pitch to the government and said, we're willing to do something, but you've got to do something as well. And when we do it, we must have an exit strategy. Now, and what we mean by that is you're going to put some money in, and we're going to put some money in, and we're going to make it work, and it's going to generate value, and we're going to measure that. What do you mean we're going to measure it? Well, we're not going to continue unless we can demonstrate that it adds value and it improves
Whatever it might be.
whatever. We're going to measure it. Right. I'm comfortable with this. So we said, well, that's the basis on which we're going to do it, and that's why we did it. The final piece of work that we did before the organisation I worked for, before we exited and left all of these sectors with their own capability to do the things, including the NHS. The NHS set up their own organisation, which was very, very top heavy. The last thing we did was we said we would like to share some of our methodology with your people, and we will take 10 people, you can nominate them, and we will teach them value stream mapping. Now, it will be no surprise with the intellect of the people that they gave us, they had no problem in understanding how to do it in the analysis. Did any of that value stream mapping ever generate any physical, measurable, sustainable benefits? No. That was
Okay.
Centralised buying is not prepared even now for laboratory paper. Or
No.
I think we need to remind you that we are being webcasted, and for instance, our Masentle from Lesotho Hub, they were networking among themselves. Data is very useful, and the Prime Minister of Lesotho would like very much for us to meet him sometime later when we finish a webcast. So we're going to do that. Martin, one thing that you're very well known for it, besides your kindness and informality, and you are one of us wherever we are, in the bush or in Langkawi or in fancy kind of Dar es Salaam new conferences to be launched, tents and so on. You always reminded everybody of the fact that leave it here for a moment.
Okay.
One needs to take his coat off.
Sure.
I mean, meaning that here is not about tie, and you don't have a tie today. And it's not about having a coat, because that's a different type of space.
Continue your conference.
There's a constituency. Thank you, Jonathan.
Gabby's already on there.
You're great, Jonathan. So,
okay.
and you did that with leaders, heads of government, who appeared in the Smart Partnership Fabric, Alberto.
What time tomorrow?
Let's talk tomorrow about this.
Well, he wants to know today.
Well, that's too bad.
So I say no. Okay, so
Okay,
Gabby's
fine.
already on.
That's all right.
You have a tie.
So,
Yes, she's talking about the tie.
well, I remember that in most of the dialogues, Martin, he didn't realize, I was afraid of Martin, that he didn't have a tie, So I had to go around each and every table to collect ties. Do you remember? Give me your tie or put your tie, because Martin doesn't, including heads of government. But he stopped to the point of telling a head of government, addressing to him or her, differently from Your Excellency.
No, when we used to have private sessions.
Yes,
Heads of government and fellows.
session. Yes.
And I got a bit, inverted commas, pissed off. Because they were all addressing themselves as Mr. President this and Mr. Prime Minister that. I said, for goodness sake, you know each other well enough. Why do you call each other Jim and Fred or Sarah and Anne?
Or Bob.
Or Bob, or whatever.
We never did that.
I must say it sort of caused a few eyebrows to raise, but it didn't last very long. They couldn't get out of this habit of it was just protocol.
No.
But yet, if you're going to achieve things, I mean, they have to sort of end up putting their arms around each other and doing a sun dance together.
And it did happen. It did happen. But one person who did start all that, and was a symbol of that, you probably don't know, was Jonathan Solomon.